Hello, and welcome back to my audio reality life story. I would like to personally thank you for taking the time to hang out with us today. Whether you're commuting, hitting the gym, or just relaxing, we are so incredibly grateful you're here. In today's episode, the rain had just stopped when Ethan Carter stepped out of his office tower. The city glowed beneath golden evening light, and people hurried past without noticing one another. To everyone who knew Ethan, he was the definition of success. At 38, he owned a fast-growing technology company, drove expensive cars, lived in a luxurious penthouse, and was regularly featured in business magazines. People admired him. Few truly knew him. Behind every award and every smiling photograph was a man who believed one dangerous idea: winning was all that mattered. If honesty slowed him down, he ignored it. If kindness cost him money, he abandoned it. If someone trusted him, he saw an opportunity. He often laughed at people who believed in justice. Karma, he would say during expensive dinners with investors. That's just a fairy tale people tell themselves to feel better. Everyone around him laughed. Everyone except Daniel. Daniel had been Ethan's childhood friend. Unlike Ethan, Daniel never chased wealth. He became a teacher, lived in a modest home, and believed that character mattered more than reputation. One evening, Daniel quietly said, "Success built on broken people doesn't stay standing forever." Ethan smirked. One evening, Daniel quietly said, "Success built on broken people doesn't stay standing forever. That's why you're a teacher and I'm a millionaire." The words hurt, but Daniel simply smiled with sadness. "I hope one day you understand." Years earlier, Ethan and Daniel had dreamed of building a company together. Daniel created the original software that later became Ethan's fortune. But when investors arrived, Ethan secretly removed Daniel's name from every legal document. He convinced him the paperwork was temporary. Weeks later, the company officially belonged to Ethan alone. Daniel lost everything. He could have sued. Instead, he walked away. Not because he was weak, because he refused to spend years consumed by revenge. He rebuilt his life from nothing. Meanwhile, Ethan became richer than he ever imagined. Success changed Ethan. Employees feared him. He fired workers moments before they qualified for bonuses. He stole ideas from junior developers and claimed them as his own. He manipulated contracts until small businesses collapsed. Families lost income because of decisions he signed without hesitation. Every time someone suffered, he told himself the same sentence: "Business isn't personal." Eventually, people stopped challenging him. His confidence became arrogance. His arrogance became blindness. Across town lived an elderly woman named Mrs. Alvarez. She owned the small building where Ethan's first office had once operated. Years before, when Ethan had no money, she had allowed him to delay paying rent for nearly 6 months. Without her kindness, his company would have failed before it began. Now she faced financial hardship after medical expenses consumed her savings. She contacted Ethan, not asking for charity, only asking if he could purchase the building at a fair price instead of forcing a legal dispute over property rights his lawyers had discovered. Ethan never met her. His legal team intimidated her until she accepted a fraction of its value. She quietly signed. When asked why she didn't fight, she answered, "I don't want bitterness to be the last thing I carry." Within months, she passed away. Ethan never attended the funeral. He barely remembered her name. Years rolled by. His company became an international success. Luxury surrounded him. Yet something strange began happening. The people around him smiled less sincerely. Friends disappeared unless they needed money. Family gatherings became uncomfortable. His phone was full of contacts. His life was empty. Still, he believed he had won. Some people think consequences arrive like lightning, fast, loud, impossible to miss. But life rarely works that way. Most of the time, consequences arrive quietly. They take years to find us. By then, we've convinced ourselves we've escaped them. Morning sunlight reflected from the glass walls of Carter Technologies, one of the fastest growing software companies in the country. Employees filled the lobby, moving with practiced urgency. Every conversation grew quieter when Ethan walked by. His polished shoes echoed against the marble floor. Nobody greeted him, not because they disliked him, because they feared him. Fear had become the culture of the company. Late employees lost bonuses, mistakes earned public humiliation, ideas were welcomed until Ethan claimed them as his own. To the outside world, he was celebrated as a visionary entrepreneur. Inside the company, he ruled like a king who demanded obedience instead of respect. Yet Ethan believed he was simply doing what successful people had to do. Weak people complain, he often said during meetings. Winners adapt. Those words became the company's unofficial motto. No one dared question them. On the 20th floor sat a young software engineer named Maya. Only 26 years old, she had spent months developing an artificial intelligence platform that promised to transform the company's future. She worked late nights, missed birthdays, skipped vacations. Everything she had was poured into the project. Finally, presentation day arrived. The boardroom was filled with investors. Maya stood at the front, nervous but hopeful. Before she could begin, Ethan walked in. He smiled confidently. "Thank you all for coming." For the next 40 minutes, Ethan explained the project, every feature, every innovation, every breakthrough. He never once mentioned Maya. She sat silently at the end of the table, watching years of effort become someone else's achievement. The investors applauded. One even stood to shake Ethan's hand. "Genius," he said. Ethan accepted the compliment without hesitation. Maya quietly packed her laptop. No arguments, no accusations, just disappointment. As she reached the door, Ethan finally spoke. "Excellent work supporting the project." Supporting. One word erased years of dedication. She nodded politely, then left. Across town, another life unfolded far from corporate skyscrapers. Daniel Brooks stood in front of a classroom filled with children. The room wasn't luxurious. The desks showed years of use. Paint peeled from one corner of the wall, yet laughter echoed through every lesson. Daniel believed education wasn't just about mathematics or grammar. It was about character. At the end of class, one student raised his hand. "Mr. Brooks, why do honest people sometimes lose?" The classroom fell silent. Daniel smiled gently. "Have you ever planted a tree?" The boy nodded. "It takes years before it becomes strong enough to give shade," Daniel said. "But if someone plants weeds instead, they grow faster," another student answered. "They do," Daniel agreed. "But which one lasts?" The children understood. Good things often took longer. That lesson had guided Daniel's entire life. It was also the lesson Ethan had forgotten. Years earlier, Ethan and Daniel had been inseparable. They grew up on the same street, shared the same dreams, spent countless nights sketching inventions in old notebooks. When everyone else laughed at their impossible ambitions, they encouraged each other. One dreamed in algorithms, the other dreamed in possibilities. Together, they planned to build something that would change the world. Neither imagined that success would one day separate them. Their first office wasn't really an office. It was a tiny rented room above a bakery. The ceiling leaked whenever it rained. The computers were secondhand. The furniture came from roadside collections. But every morning they arrived with excitement. Mrs. Elena Alvarez, the elderly owner of the building, often brought them homemade soup. "You boys work too hard," she would laugh. When they struggled to pay rent, she quietly told them, "Pay me when you can." Without her kindness, the company would have ended before it truly began. Money appeared. With opportunity came contracts, lawyers, shareholders, legal documents hundreds of pages long. Daniel trusted Ethan completely. They had been friends for over 20 years. When Ethan handed him papers to sign, Daniel barely looked at them. "I've already checked everything," Ethan assured him. "We're in this together." Daniel smiled. "I know." He signed. That single signature changed both their lives forever. Several weeks later, celebration filled the office. Investment money had officially arrived. Employees cheered. Champagne bottles opened. Everyone celebrated. Everyone except Daniel. He noticed something strange. His access to company accounts had disappeared. His name had vanished from internal records. At first, he assumed it was a technical error, until Ethan invited him into his office. The room suddenly felt colder. Daniel smiled uncertainly. "Something's wrong with my account." Ethan folded his hands. "No." "What do you mean?" "The company legally belongs to me." Daniel laughed, expecting a joke. Then he saw Ethan's face. It wasn't a joke. "I don't understand. You signed the ownership transfer." "I signed investment paperwork. You signed exactly what was in front of you." Silence filled the room. Daniel's breathing became shallow. "You tricked me. I protected the company. Our company. My company." Every word struck harder than the last. "We built this together." Ethan looked out the window. "I built the future," Daniel whispered. "You built it alone?" Ethan didn't answer. He didn't need to. The paperwork already had. Daniel could have fought. Many lawyers later told him he had a strong case. Friends encouraged him to sue, expose Ethan, destroy everything he had built. For days, anger consumed him. Then one evening he returned to the empty office above the bakery. Mrs. Alvarez found him sitting alone in the dark. She placed a warm bowl of soup beside him. Neither spoke for several minutes. Finally, she asked, "Are you deciding whether revenge will heal your heart?" Daniel stared at the floor. "I want justice." She nodded slowly. Justice and revenge often wear the same face at first. He looked up. "But only one lets you sleep peacefully." Those words stayed with him. The next morning, Daniel walked away, not because he accepted betrayal, but because he refused to let betrayal define the rest of his life. Meanwhile, Ethan celebrated. His company expanded faster than anyone expected. Awards lined his office. Luxury replaced struggle. Magazine covers called him the self-made visionary. Each headline made him believe his own lie a little more. Soon he couldn't remember the version of himself who had once shared dreams with his best friend. Success had rewritten his memories, or so he thought, because somewhere beneath every achievement, every applause, every promotion, every $1,000,000, the truth remained buried, waiting, patiently, like a seed beneath frozen ground, invisible, silent, alive. And the thing about buried seeds is that they eventually grow, sometimes into forests, sometimes into storms, sometimes into consequences. Ethan believed the past was over. He had no idea. The past had simply been waiting. 3 years passed. Carter Technologies had grown into a global powerhouse. Its offices stretched across continents. Its software powered hospitals, banks, universities, and governments. Business magazines called Ethan Carter the architect of modern innovation. Every interview ended the same way. Reporters asked, "What's the secret to your success?" Ethan smiled. "Never let emotions interfere with business." Millions admired that answer. Very few understood what it really meant. For Ethan, it meant sacrificing loyalty for profit, friendship for opportunity, and integrity for power. Each compromise felt small on its own. Together, they became the foundation of his empire. One autumn morning, a young executive walked into Carter Technologies for his first day. His name was Liam Reynolds. He was 30 years old, confident without appearing arrogant, quiet without seeming timid. He listened more than he spoke. While others tried to impress Ethan with grand presentations, Liam simply solved problems. When a client threatened to cancel a multi-million-dollar contract, Liam resolved the dispute in a single afternoon. When departments argued over resources, he found solutions that satisfied everyone. His reputation spread quickly. Within months, Ethan promoted him. Within a year, Liam became his closest advisor. Many employees were surprised. Ethan trusted almost no one. Yet with Liam, he lowered his guard. Late one evening, the two men stood in Ethan's office overlooking the city skyline. Thousands of lights shimmered below like stars scattered across the earth. Ethan handed Liam a glass of sparkling water. "You remind me of myself," he said. Liam smiled politely. "I'll take that as a compliment." "It is," Ethan said. For the first time in years, Ethan shared stories he had never told another employee. How he negotiated difficult deals, how he defeated competitors, how he stayed ahead. Liam listened carefully. He rarely interrupted. He simply absorbed every lesson. Ethan believed he was mentoring the next generation. He never considered that he might be creating his own replacement. Meanwhile, life outside the skyscraper continued quietly. Daniel Brooks still taught at the same neighborhood school. His hair had begun to gray. His students still adored him. One afternoon, a former student visited after graduating from university. "You were right," she said. Daniel looked confused. "About what?" She smiled. "You told us that character is something we build every day." She paused. "I almost cheated on my final exams. No one would have known. What stopped you?" "I remembered something you said." Daniel smiled. "What was that?" "The person you become is always watching the choices you make." She laughed softly. "I couldn't disappoint the future version of myself." As she walked away, Daniel watched with quiet gratitude. He never became rich. He never appeared in newspapers. But every year, pieces of his kindness lived on through others. The world rarely celebrates that kind of success, yet it is often the kind that lasts the longest. Back at Carter Technologies, Maya was preparing to resign. Years had passed since Ethan claimed credit for her breakthrough. She had endured enough. Her resignation letter sat on her desk. Before submitting it, she looked around the office one last time. So many talented people had come and gone. Not because they lacked ability, because they had lost hope. As she packed her belongings, Liam approached. "I heard you're leaving." She nodded. "I should have left years ago." Liam glanced around to ensure no one was listening. "Can I ask you something?" She hesitated. "What really happened with the AI project?" Maya looked at him carefully. "Why does it matter now?" "Because I want the truth." She sighed. "The project wasn't Ethan's." "It was yours?" She nodded. "I built every line. And he took it." Silence settled between them. Liam thanked her and walked away. His expression revealed nothing, but inside his mind, another piece of a much larger puzzle had fallen into place. Over the following months, Liam became even more valuable to Ethan. He attended confidential board meetings. He reviewed financial strategies. He managed acquisitions worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Gradually, Ethan gave him access to almost everything: passwords, private servers, investor communications, legal archives, information that no ordinary executive should possess. Everyone assumed Ethan had finally found someone worthy of his trust. What they didn't know was that Liam never asked for trust. He simply earned it, one careful decision at a time. One rainy evening, Ethan received an unexpected phone call. The caller ID displayed a familiar name. Daniel Brooks. For a long moment, Ethan considered ignoring it. Instead, curiosity won. Daniel, it's been a long time. It has. I won't keep you long, Daniel said. I just wanted to ask how you're doing. Ethan laughed. You've seen the headlines. I've seen the headlines, Daniel replied gently. I asked about you. The question lingered. For reasons Ethan couldn't explain, he felt uncomfortable. I'm doing great. I'm glad, Daniel said. Another pause. Then Daniel quietly added, just remember, success isn't measured by how high you climb. It's measured by whether you can still recognize yourself when you get there. Ethan smiled dismissively. You always did like your philosophy, and you always preferred shortcuts. The line went silent. Neither man argued. Neither needed to. They had chosen different paths long ago. Only time remained to reveal where those paths truly led. That same night, long after everyone had left the office, Liam remained alone. The cleaning staff passed his office without noticing the glow from his computer. Folders opened one after another. Financial reports, ownership records, archived emails, old contracts. One document caught his attention. It bore two names, Ethan Carter, Daniel Brooks. Liam read every page. Then he leaned back in his chair. So that's how it began. A faint smile crossed his face, not one of amusement, one of understanding. He finally knew the blueprint. He finally understood how Ethan had built an empire. Not with genius alone, but with betrayal. Liam quietly closed the file. Outside, thunder rolled across the city. Inside the empty office, the only sound was the ticking of an antique clock Ethan kept on the wall. Tick, tick, tick. Time never hurried. Neither did consequences. And somewhere beyond Ethan's confidence, beyond the awards, beyond the wealth, something unseen had already begun to move. Not with anger, not with vengeance, but with perfect patience. Because karma never races to catch up. It simply waits until there's nowhere left to run. Winter settled over the city. The mornings grew colder, the nights grew longer. Yet inside Carter Technologies, business had never seemed stronger. Quarterly profits reached record highs. Investors praised Ethan's leadership. New international contracts arrived almost every week. To everyone watching from the outside, Ethan Carter was untouchable. But appearances can be deceptive. Sometimes the strongest-looking buildings are already cracking beneath the surface. The cracks simply haven't reached the walls yet. Liam continued to play the role of the perfect executive. He arrived before everyone else. He left after everyone else. He answered every phone call, solved every crisis, protected Ethan from problems before they became public. Employees admired him. Clients trusted him. Board members increasingly sought his opinion before Ethan's. At first, Ethan considered it a compliment. My people are becoming leaders, he proudly told a colleague. He never noticed that leadership was quietly becoming loyalty, and loyalty was slowly changing direction. One afternoon, Maya received an unexpected message. It was from Liam. They met at a quiet cafe far from the business district. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. Finally, Liam slid a folder across the table. Inside were copies of patents, software documentation, original development records. Every piece of evidence proving Maya had created the artificial intelligence platform years earlier. She looked up in disbelief. Where did you get these? Liam answered calmly. I've been looking through the company's archives. Why? Because the truth matters. Maya stared at him. No one inside that company has ever cared about the truth. Liam smiled faintly. Maybe that's why the company is about to change. What are you planning? He closed the folder. When someone spends years building an empire on dishonesty, they unknowingly leave behind a map showing exactly how to dismantle it. Maya felt a chill. "You sound like you're seeking revenge." Liam shook his head. "No, I'm seeking balance." Weeks passed. Small things began happening. A respected engineer resigned, then another, then an entire product team. Human resources blamed better salaries elsewhere. Ethan wasn't concerned. People leave all the time. But they weren't simply leaving. They were joining the same new company. A company no one had heard of 6 months earlier. A company called Nova Horizon. Its founder remained anonymous. Rumors spread. Some believed wealthy investors were behind it. Others whispered that someone from Carter Technologies had started it. No one knew for certain, except Liam. At the same time, several longtime clients quietly ended their contracts. Nothing dramatic, no angry press releases, no lawsuits. Just polite emails thanking Carter Technologies for years of service. Then they disappeared. Ethan blamed the economy. His financial advisors blamed changing markets. Neither explanation felt convincing. Still, the profits remained healthy. The warning signs were small enough to ignore, and that's the danger of slow consequences. They don't announce themselves, they whisper. One evening, Ethan attended an exclusive charity gala. Crystal chandeliers illuminated the ballroom. Business leaders laughed over expensive dinners. Photographers captured every handshake. Ethan enjoyed the attention. Across the room, however, he noticed something unusual. Several investors who normally rushed to greet him were speaking privately with Liam. They laughed together, exchanged business cards, shook hands. When Ethan approached, the conversation ended almost instantly. "Everything all right?" he asked. "Of course," Liam replied smoothly. "We were discussing future innovation." Ethan nodded, but something felt different. For the first time in years, he experienced a feeling he hadn't known since his early 20s. Doubt. That night he couldn't sleep. He walked through his penthouse overlooking the city. The silence felt heavier than usual. He poured himself a glass of water and stared at the skyline. Thousands of lights stretched to the horizon. Years ago, those lights had inspired him. Now, they felt distant. His phone buzzed, a message from Daniel. It contained only one sentence. "Be careful that success doesn't convince you everyone is walking beside you for the same reason." Ethan frowned. He didn't reply. Instead, he deleted the message, yet the words refused to leave his mind. The following Monday, the executive board gathered for its quarterly strategy meeting. Every director was present. Large digital screens displayed impressive financial charts. Ethan entered confidently. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "this will be our biggest year yet." Before he could continue, one board member interrupted. "We'd like to discuss employee retention." Another added, "and declining client renewals." A third spoke. "There are concerns regarding internal transparency." Ethan looked toward Liam. Normally, Liam handled these discussions. Instead, Liam remained silent, watching, listening, almost waiting. The meeting ended awkwardly. Nothing disastrous had happened. But Ethan left feeling unsettled. For the first time, the room hadn't belonged entirely to him. Late that evening, Ethan reviewed internal reports. Something immediately caught his attention. Several confidential files had been accessed, legally, using executive authorization. The user account belonged to Liam Reynolds. He checked another report, then another. The same name appeared repeatedly: financial records, ownership agreements, archived correspondence, legal settlements, documents dating back nearly 15 years, including the original ownership transfer signed by Daniel Brooks. Ethan's heartbeat quickened. Why would Liam need those files? He reached for his phone, then stopped. Calling Liam now would reveal suspicion. Instead, he decided to wait. He had built his career by staying patient. Surely patience would reveal the answer. He didn't realize someone else had learned patience from him. Across town, in a modern office overlooking the river, Liam stood before a group of engineers. Some had once worked for Ethan, others had been competitors. A large screen displayed the logo of Nova Horizon. Liam looked around the room. "I didn't bring you here because I promised higher salaries." He paused. "I brought you here because talent deserves honesty." The room remained silent. "For years you've watched innovation become ego." He continued, "You've watched credit stolen, voices ignored, loyalty exploited." He looked directly at Maya. "That ends here." The room erupted in applause. For many, it wasn't about money, it was about dignity. A week later, Ethan received a confidential envelope. No return address. Inside was a single chess piece, a black king. Attached was a handwritten note. "The game ends the way it began, one move at a time." There was no signature, no explanation, only silence. Ethan stared at the piece for several minutes. Then he locked it inside his desk drawer. For the first time in decades, he felt something he thought success had erased forever. Fear. Not fear of losing money, not fear of losing status. Fear of the unknown, because enemies who announce themselves can be defeated, but enemies who wait, who learn, who understand your every move, are far more dangerous. Outside his office window, snow began to fall. Each snowflake landed without a sound, one by one, almost invisible, until the ground was completely covered. Consequences often arrive the same way, not in a single devastating moment, but so quietly that by the time you notice them, there is no clear path back. And somewhere, beyond Ethan's sight, every final piece was falling into place. The board had been arranged. The players had chosen their sides. The next move would change everything. The morning began like every other. Ethan Carter woke before sunrise. He adjusted his tie in the mirror, glanced at the skyline outside his penthouse, and smiled. Today was supposed to be another milestone. The board would approve Carter Technologies' largest international merger, a deal worth billions. News outlets were already waiting outside headquarters. Investors had flown in from around the world. By sunset, Ethan expected to become one of the most influential business leaders in the industry. He had no idea. This would be the day his empire would end. The boardroom buzzed with quiet conversation. Coffee cups rested beside stacks of legal documents. Large screens displayed the company's logo. Every executive was present. Every board member had arrived early. Even the atmosphere felt different. Too calm, too controlled, too prepared. Ethan entered confidently. "Good morning, everyone." A few people nodded. Most avoided eye contact. He noticed it immediately. Before he could ask why, the chairwoman stood. "Mr. Carter, before we discuss the merger, there are several urgent matters that require immediate attention." Ethan frowned. "What kind of matters?" She looked toward the end of the table. "Liam." Slowly, Liam stood. His face showed no anger, no satisfaction, only composure. He placed a black folder on the table, then another, and another. Each one landed with a soft thud that echoed through the silent room. "What is this?" Ethan asked. Liam answered quietly, "The truth." One by one, the folders were opened. Inside were documents spanning nearly 2 decades, contracts altered after signatures, emails proving stolen intellectual property, financial records showing hidden transactions, testimonies from former employees, original software files credited to Maya, the ownership agreement that removed Daniel Brooks from the company. Everything, every shortcut, every betrayal, every lie, painstakingly documented, no accusations, only evidence. The room remained silent as directors turned page after page. Some shook their heads, others stared at Ethan with disbelief. The empire he had spent years building was collapsing under the weight of its own history. Ethan looked directly at Liam. "You planned this. I documented it. You betrayed me." Liam held his gaze. "No, you taught me how betrayal works." The words struck harder than any accusation. "You showed me that power belongs to whoever controls the paperwork. You taught me that trust is something to exploit. You taught me that people become invisible once they've served your purpose." He paused. "I simply learned from the best teacher I ever had." The room fell silent. For the first time, Ethan heard his own philosophy spoken back to him. It sounded far uglier than he remembered. The chairwoman cleared her throat. "Effective immediately, the board has voted to remove you as Chief Executive Officer." The words echoed through the room. Removed. Not resigned. Not retired. Removed. Security personnel quietly entered the boardroom. Not because Ethan had become dangerous, because he no longer belonged there. He looked around the room. Faces he had known for years. People who once applauded every speech. Now none of them spoke. The silence was unbearable. Outside the building, journalists had already gathered. News alerts spread across phones around the world. Carter Technologies. CEO removed ethics investigation. Launched former employees come forward. Within hours, investors withdrew billions. The company's stock plummeted. Business partners suspended agreements. Government investigators seized financial records. Every hidden decision Ethan believed had disappeared into the past returned all at once. Not because someone invented new accusations, because the old truth had finally reached daylight. For weeks, headlines dominated every news cycle. Former employees shared stories they had kept hidden for years. Maya publicly received recognition as the true creator of the revolutionary AI platform. Daniel's original contribution to the company became part of the official corporate history. Mrs. Elena Alvarez's kindness, once forgotten, was remembered in interviews with early employees who described how she had saved the struggling startup by allowing two young dreamers to keep working when they couldn't afford rent. The world slowly learned something Ethan had spent years trying to hide. No one succeeds alone. Days later, Ethan walked through his empty penthouse. The artwork had been removed, furniture sold, boxes filled the rooms. His phone, once flooded with calls, remained silent. He opened a drawer and found an old notebook. Inside were faded sketches from his youth, his handwriting, beside Daniel's, ideas, dreams, plans to build something that would help people. For several minutes, he stared at those pages. Then tears quietly rolled down his face. Not because he had lost his company, because he realized he had lost himself long before he lost his business. Several months passed. Court cases continued. Settlements were reached. Much of Ethan's remaining wealth was used to compensate former employees and business partners harmed by his decisions. Some accepted, others refused. He understood both. Forgiveness cannot be demanded. It can only be offered. One crisp spring afternoon, Ethan drove to the neighborhood where Daniel still taught. Children laughed on the playground. Nothing about the school had changed. Daniel noticed him standing by the gate. He walked over. For a long moment, neither man spoke. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. "I've rehearsed this apology 1,000 times." Daniel smiled gently. "And?" "No version seems big enough." Daniel nodded. "Some wounds leave scars." "I know. I don't expect you to forget." "I won't. I don't expect you to trust me again." Daniel looked into his old friend's eyes. Trust isn't rebuilt with words. It's rebuilt with years. Ethan lowered his head. "I understand." Then, to Daniel's surprise, Ethan reached into his bag and placed the original notebook between them. "I found this." Daniel opened it. The faded sketches were still there. 2 young dreamers. 1 impossible dream. For a moment, both men remembered who they had once been. Over the next several years, Ethan disappeared from public attention. He accepted consulting work for nonprofit organizations, not for wealth, but to help young entrepreneurs avoid the mistakes he had made. He spoke openly about ethical leadership. Whenever audiences asked how he rebuilt his life, he always answered the same way. "I didn't rebuild my reputation. I rebuilt my character, because one can exist without the other." One day, Ethan quietly visited Mrs. Alvarez's grave. He placed fresh flowers beside the headstone. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "You believed in me before anyone else did." The wind rustled through the nearby trees. There was no answer. Some apologies arrived too late, but they still matter, because they changed the person speaking them. Years later, Daniel invited Ethan to speak to his graduating students. The classroom was filled with hopeful young faces. One student raised a hand. "Mr. Carter, if you could change one decision in your life, what would it be?" Ethan smiled sadly. "I used to think success meant reaching the top before everyone else." He looked around the room. "But success without integrity is simply failure wearing expensive clothes." The room fell silent. Then another student asked, "Do you believe karma is real?" Ethan looked toward the window where sunlight poured across the classroom. A gentle smile crossed his face. "I do," he paused. "But not because life is trying to punish us. Karma is life giving us every opportunity to choose who we're becoming. If we ignore those opportunities, the consequences eventually become our teachers." As the students applauded, Daniel watched quietly from the back of the room. His old friend had not recovered everything he lost. He never became wealthy again. He never returned to magazine covers. But he had finally become something far more valuable. A man who no longer had to hide from his own reflection. Outside, children laughed beneath the afternoon sun. The world kept moving, as it always does. Patient, unhurried, just like karma itself. For karma never races. It never shouts. It simply watches. It gives every person countless chances to choose honesty over deception, kindness over selfishness, humility over pride. And when the right moment finally arrives, it doesn't bring revenge. It brings the harvest of every seed we planted. Some harvest peace, others harvest regret. The choice was never made on the day consequences arrived. It was made every ordinary day before that. Moral lesson: karma is not about revenge, it is about accountability. Every thought, every choice, and every action plants a seed in the lives of others and in our own character. Success built on lies may shine for a season, but truth is patient. It waits. Wealth can be lost and reputations can be restored, but character is the one possession that determines who we become. Choose honesty when no one is watching, show kindness when there is nothing to gain, and live with integrity even when shortcuts seem easier. In the end, the life you inherit is the one your daily choices quietly created. Thanks for tuning in. Before we go, a quick thank you to all of our loyal subscribers. Your feedback and engagement keep us going. We appreciate every single one of you.